Nobody wanted these beat-up old trucks in the 1990s. Now they're selling for more than brand new luxury cars. Picture this. It's 1995 and you walk onto a used car lot. The salesman practically begs you to take home a rusted 1970s pickup for $500. You laugh and walk away, thinking only a fool would buy that junk. Fast forward to today, and that same worthless truck just sold at auction for $150,000. That fool? He's now laughing all the way to the bank. Before we dive into these incredible transformations, here's something wild. Only 1.5% of people watching this channel are actually subscribed. If you're enjoying this content, hitting that subscribe button really helps me get monetized and keep bringing you these amazing stories. The 1970s were tough times for American trucks. Gas prices shot through the roof, emission regulations strangled engines, and quality control went out the window. These trucks earned terrible reputations. They leaked oil, rusted faster than you could paint them, and broke down more often than they ran. Car lots couldn't give them away. Junkyards were packed with them. Most people saw these vehicles as rolling disasters, destined for the scrap heap. But something magical happened over the decades. As these trucks became scarce, collectors started paying attention. The very flaws that made them unpopular in their time became charming quirks that told stories of a bygone era. Suddenly, that rust became patina. Those simple designs became timeless classics. And those unreliable engines? Well, they became the foundation for incredible restoration projects. The transformation wasn't overnight. It started slowly in the early 2000s when a few collectors began snatching up the cleanest examples. By 2010, prices started climbing. But nothing prepared the market for what happened after 2020. Social media influencers showcased stunning restorations. TV shows glorified vintage trucks. And a new generation of enthusiasts with deep pockets entered the scene. Number 10. The 1979 Chevrolet C10. The C10 was the poster child for everything wrong with late 1970s truck building. Chevy had just switched to a new design that looked awkward compared to the beloved earlier models. The build quality was questionable at best. Paint peeled off in sheets, door handles broke regularly, and the interior felt like it was assembled by blindfolded workers on their first day. In 1995, you could buy a decent C10 for around $800. Most people avoided them like the plague. They had this reputation for being unreliable gas guzzlers that would leave you stranded on the side of the road. The styling looked dated, and compared to the sleek imports flooding the market, these trucks seemed like dinosaurs. But here's where it gets interesting. The C10 had something imports couldn't match: pure American character. That square, no-nonsense design that seemed so outdated in the 1990s suddenly looked timeless by 2010. The simple mechanics that once frustrated owners became a blessing for modern enthusiasts who could actually work on their vehicles without a computer science degree. Today, a clean 1979 C10 regularly sells for $35,000 to $55,000. Show-quality restorations can hit $80,000 or more. That's a return on investment that would make Wall Street jealous. The truck that nobody wanted is now the centerpiece of car shows across America. Number 9. The 1978 Ford F-100. Ford's F-100 suffered from terrible timing. Released just as the fuel crisis was hitting hard, these trucks were gas-hungry monsters in a world suddenly obsessed with efficiency. The 1978 model year was particularly rough. It was Ford's last year before switching to the more fuel-efficient F-150, making it feel like a relic before it even left the showroom floor. The build quality was inconsistent. Some rolled off the line perfect, others had problems from day one. The electrical systems were notorious for mysterious failures. Window regulators broke constantly. And don't get me started on the rust issues. These trucks could develop holes in the bed faster than you could believe. In the late 1990s, used F-100s were everywhere and cheap. Farmers used them as work trucks until they literally fell apart. Young people bought them as first vehicles because they were affordable and easy to fix. Nobody was collecting them because, frankly, nobody respected them. But collectors eventually recognized what made these trucks special. The 1978 F-100 represented the end of an era, the last of Ford's traditional full-size pickups before the company shifted focus to efficiency over character. The styling, which seemed dated in 1995, now looks authentically vintage in the best possible way. A nice 1978 F-100 that sold for $1,200 in 1998 now brings $25,000 to $45,000 depending on condition. The rarest variants with desirable options can push past $60,000. It's a perfect example of how being the last of something can eventually become incredibly valuable. Number 8. The 1976 Dodge D100. Dodge trucks in the mid-1970s were like the middle child of the big three, often forgotten and rarely loved. The D100 had this awkward design that couldn't decide if it wanted to be rugged or refined. The front end looked confused, the proportions seemed off, and the interior quality made you wonder if Chrysler even cared about their truck division. These trucks earned a reputation for electrical gremlins that would drive owners crazy. Lights would flicker for no reason. The radio would cut out randomly, and the heating system had a mind of its own. Add in the typical 1970s rust issues, and you had a vehicle that most people wouldn't take as a gift. The market reflected this indifference. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, D100s were the trucks nobody talked about. While Chevy and Ford enthusiasts argued about which was better, Dodge trucks sat quietly depreciating in driveways and used car lots. You could pick up a decent runner for $600 on a good day. But that obscurity became their strength. While everyone was fighting over Chevys and Fords, smart collectors quietly accumulated the best Dodge examples. The unusual styling that seemed awkward in the 1970s now looks distinctively different in a sea of similar trucks. That underdog status became part of their charm. Today's market tells a different story. Clean D100s now command $20,000 to $40,000, with exceptional examples pushing higher. The truck that was nobody's first choice has become a collector's hidden gem. Number 7. The 1977 GMC Sierra Grande. GMC always lived in Chevrolet's shadow, and nowhere was this more obvious than with their trucks. The Sierra Grande was essentially a dressed-up Chevrolet with a different grille, but somehow GMC managed to charge more money for basically the same vehicle. This made them even less popular than their Chevy cousins. The 1977 model year was particularly rough. Quality control was inconsistent across GM's truck line, but GMC seemed to get some of the worst examples. Paint problems were common, interior trim pieces fell off regularly, and the famous GM rust issues were on full display. Many of these trucks developed serious structural rust before they hit 100,000 miles. The market couldn't have cared less about GMC trucks in the 1990s. They were seen as overpriced Chevrolets with fancy badges. Most buyers chose either a Chevy for value or a Ford for reputation. GMC trucks sat on lots gathering dust, eventually selling at steep discounts to anyone willing to take them. But scarcity has a funny way of creating value. While millions of C10s were produced, far fewer Sierra Grandes left the factory. As collectors cleaned out the Chevy market, attention turned to their rarer GMC siblings. The fancy interior trim that seemed pretentious in 1977 now looks upscale and desirable. A 1977 Sierra Grande that struggled to sell for $700 in 1995 now brings $25,000 to $50,000 in restored condition. The fancy trim levels that nobody wanted are now the most sought-after versions, sometimes selling for more than comparable Chevrolets. Number 6. The 1974 International Scout II. International Harvester's Scout II was supposed to compete with the Chevy Blazer and Ford Bronco, but it felt like it was designed by farmers for farmers. The styling was boxy and utilitarian. The interior was Spartan to the point of being harsh. And the build quality made other 1970s vehicles look sophisticated by comparison. These vehicles had problems that would make modern owners weep. The doors didn't fit properly from the factory. Water leaked in everywhere, through windows, doors, and mysterious places nobody could identify. The electrical system was a nightmare of corroded connections and failed components. And the famous international rust issues made these trucks disappear faster than ice cream on a hot summer day. In the used market, Scouts were pariahs. They had terrible resale value because everyone knew about their problems. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, you could find decent Scouts for under $1,000 all day long. Most people wouldn't take them even at those prices because the repair costs often exceeded the purchase price. But enthusiasts eventually recognized what made Scouts special. They were honest, simple vehicles that could go anywhere and do anything. That agricultural toughness that seemed crude in the 1980s became authentic and appealing to modern collectors. The rarity factor kicked in too. International stopped making Scouts in 1980, making them genuine pieces of automotive history. Today's Scout market is absolutely on fire. Clean examples sell for $30,000 to $60,000 regularly. The rarest models with desirable options can push past $80,000. It's an incredible transformation for a vehicle that most people considered worthless junk just 20 years ago. Number 5. The 1975 Chevrolet K10 Blazer. The mid-1970s K10 Blazer was Chevrolet's answer to changing times, but it felt like a compromise that satisfied nobody. It wasn't as tough as earlier Blazers, wasn't as efficient as newer designs, and wasn't reliable enough to build a reputation on. The 1975 model year was particularly challenging because of new emissions equipment that strangled performance while adding complexity. These Blazers suffered from all the typical GM problems of the era. The paint was thin and prone to fading. Interior components broke regularly. The four-wheel drive system was more complicated than it needed to be and often failed in expensive ways. Many owners found themselves dealing with constant repairs that made ownership more frustrating than fun. The used market reflected this reputation. Throughout the 1990s, these Blazers were cheap and available, but not particularly desired. Most buyers looking for a utility vehicle chose something more modern and reliable. The K10S sat on used car lots depreciating rapidly, often selling for $1,500 to $3,000 depending on condition. But the SUV boom changed everything. As modern SUVs became larger and more car-like, enthusiasts began appreciating the raw, truck-based nature of vehicles like the K10. The removable top that seemed impractical in 1995 became a cool retro feature by 2010. The simple, reparable mechanics gained new appeal as modern vehicles became increasingly complex. Clean 1975 K10 Blazers now sell for $35,000 to $65,000, with the best examples pushing even higher. The convertible feature that once made them feel cheap now makes them incredibly desirable to collectors who want the classic SUV experience. Number 4. The 1973 Ford Bronco. The 1973 Bronco caught Ford in transition. The company was moving away from the simple, utilitarian design that made early Broncos famous, but hadn't yet figured out what they wanted the vehicle to become. The result was a Bronco that felt confused about its identity and suffered from typical early 1970s quality issues. Build quality was inconsistent across the board. Some 1973 Broncos were solid, reliable vehicles. Others had problems from the moment they left the dealer lot. Door handles broke, electrical systems failed, and the infamous Ford rust began eating away at body panels almost immediately. The interior was basic to the point of being uncomfortable, and the ride quality made you feel every bump in the road. These issues made 1973 Broncos unpopular in the used market for decades. They were too problematic to be practical daily drivers, too uncomfortable for family use, and too unreliable for serious off-road work. You could buy decent runners for $800 to $1,500 throughout the 1990s, but most people chose more modern alternatives. The transformation began when collectors realized that 1973 represented a pivotal year in Bronco history. It was one of the last years before Ford began watering down the design to appeal to broader markets. The simple, honest construction that seemed crude in 1995 became authentic and appealing to modern enthusiasts who wanted a genuine connection to automotive history. Today's market values reflect this new appreciation. Clean 1973 Broncos regularly sell for $40,000 to $70,000, with exceptional examples pushing past $90,000. The truck that nobody wanted has become one of the most sought-after vintage SUVs in America. Number 3. The 1972 Chevrolet K10 Blazer. The 1972 K10 Blazer should have been Chevrolet's SUV masterpiece, but it felt more like a rough draft than a finished product. The removable top was innovative but poorly executed. It leaked, rattled, and was difficult to install or remove. The interior was agricultural in its simplicity, and the build quality made you wonder if anyone at GM actually cared about the details. Reliability was a constant issue. The electrical system was prone to mysterious failures. The four-wheel drive system was temperamental and expensive to repair. And the famous GM rust issues were on full display. These vehicles could develop serious corrosion problems before they were even fully paid off. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, used K10 Blazers were everywhere and cheap. Most people saw them as impractical vehicles with too many problems to justify ownership. They sat on used car lots for months, eventually selling to buyers who either didn't know better or couldn't afford anything else. A decent runner could be had for $1,000 to $2,000 without much negotiation. But the classic SUV movement changed everything. As modern SUVs became more like cars, enthusiasts began yearning for the raw, truck-based experience that vehicles like the K10 provided. The removable top that seemed like a gimmick in 1992 became a desirable feature that modern SUVs couldn't match. The simple mechanics that once frustrated owners became a blessing for people tired of computerized everything. A 1972 K10 Blazer that sold for $1,200 in 1998 now brings $45,000 to $80,000 in restored condition. The best examples with rare options can push past $100,000. It's a stunning transformation for a vehicle that spent decades being ignored by the market. Number 2. The 1970 Dodge Challenger R/T truck, based on A100. This one's a bit different because it wasn't actually a traditional pickup truck, but rather Dodge's attempt at a performance-oriented commercial vehicle that almost nobody remembers today. The A100-based trucks were weird, awkward, and completely out of step with what buyers wanted in 1970. They looked like delivery vans trying to be cool, and the experiment failed spectacularly. These vehicles combined the worst aspects of commercial reliability with questionable performance pretensions. The forward control design was impractical for most truck buyers. The handling was terrible due to the short wheelbase and high center of gravity. And the performance versions were expensive failures that satisfied neither truck buyers nor performance enthusiasts. By the 1980s, these odd Dodge experiments were essentially worthless. Nobody collected them, nobody wanted them, and most ended up in junkyards or converted for commercial use. You could buy running examples for a few $100s, and even then most people passed because they were just too weird to be useful. But strangeness became their strength in the collector market. As muscle car prices exploded, enthusiasts began looking for unique alternatives that offered the same era's performance DNA in different packages. These forgotten Dodge experiments suddenly became interesting historical footnotes that told the story of Chrysler's willingness to try anything in the performance wars. Today, the few surviving examples command serious money, $35,000 to $65,000 for clean, original versions. The rarity that once made them worthless now makes them incredibly valuable to collectors who want something nobody else has. Number 1. The 1979 Ford F-100 4x4. The number 1 spot goes to a truck that represents everything that was wrong with late 1970s American automotive manufacturing, yet has become one of the most valuable classic trucks on the market today. The 1979 F-100 4x4 was Ford's last hurrah before switching to the F-150 platform, and it showed all the growing pains of a company struggling to adapt to changing times. These trucks were plagued with problems that would make modern owners question their sanity. The four-wheel drive system was complex, unreliable, and expensive to maintain. The electrical system was a maze of corroded connections and failing components. The body panels were thin and prone to rust, especially around the wheel wells and cab corners. And the interior quality was so poor that components began failing before the warranty expired. In the used market, these trucks were absolutely worthless for decades. Throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and even into the 2000s, you could buy decent running examples for $800 to $2,000. Most buyers avoided them because of their terrible reputation for reliability and their astronomical repair costs when things went wrong. But several factors combined to create the perfect storm for value appreciation. First, the 1979 model year marked the end of an era. It was Ford's last traditional full-size pickup before the company moved to more modern, efficient designs. Second, the 4x4 versions were relatively rare compared to two-wheel drive models, creating scarcity. Third, the square body styling that seemed outdated in 1995 became authentically vintage by 2015. The transformation has been absolutely stunning. Clean 1979F 104X4S now regularly sell for $50,000 to $90,000, with the best examples pushing past $120,000. Consider this. A truck that you couldn't give away for $500 in 1995 now sells for more than most people's houses. That's a return on investment of over 20,000% in just 30 years. What makes this transformation even more remarkable is that it happened despite the truck's continued reputation for problems. Modern buyers aren't purchasing these vehicles for their reliability. They're buying them for their character, their history, and their representation of a time when American trucks were simple, honest, and reparable. The lesson here isn't just about these 10 specific trucks. It's about how markets change, how tastes evolve, and how the very characteristics that make something unpopular in one era can make it incredibly valuable in another. The rust that drove buyers away in 1995 is now called patina and adds to the value. The simple mechanics that seemed primitive are now appreciated for their straightforward approach to automotive engineering. These trucks teach us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes the most overlooked, most criticized, and most abandoned vehicles of one generation become the treasured classics of the next. The key is recognizing that automotive history is cyclical. What goes down in value often comes back up, sometimes with incredible force. If you enjoyed this journey through automotive redemption stories, you'll love discovering which 1980s sports cars are following the same path from junkyard fodder to auction house stars.